Season 2 of Mythic Plus has been an absolute blast, and I personally have been having a lot of fun with both Demon Hunter and Guardian Druid. And since I did a video on Vengeance Demon Hunter already, which I will link down in the description below if you are interested in that, I decided to also make a Guardian Druid guide for you as well. Let's go ahead and get started. First off, I want to talk about hero towns. The two choices of hero towns that we have is Druid of the Claw and Elun's Chosen. Now for Mythic Plus, I will say personally, I feel that Elun's Chosen is the way to go, and you will see a lot more of this hero talent chosen when it comes to higher end Mythic Plus. But before all the Druid mains get all, Druid of the Claw is still viable for Mythic Plus. It's just much harder to play and leaves windows of being quite squishy when you shift into cat form. So aka you need to be more experienced before picking this hero talent if you are a beginner. Now I will go over both, so don't worry, but I do recommend Elun's Chosen if you are doing Mythic Plus in general, especially higher end Mythic Plus. Let's go ahead and talk about what Druid of the Claw is. So basically, Druid of the Claw is going to enable you to shift from your tank form, which is the bear form, into your cat form to allow you to do more DPS. So you might be asking, well, how am I going to be able to do that and retain my tank stats? And that's where Wild Shape Mastery comes in play. Wild Shape Mastery allows you to use your Iron Fur and Frenzy regeneration in cat form, and when transforming to bear to cat, you retain 80% of your bear form, armor, and health for 6 seconds. Also on top of that, for 6 seconds after entering bear form, you will heal for 10% of the damage taken over 8 seconds. So you do get to keep a little bit of your tankiness from the bear form, but you can see a little bit where the squishiness comes in play, but it does allow you to do more damage. One of the damage amplifiers is Ravage. Ravage basically allows your auto attacks to have a chance to make your next maul become Ravage, which Ravage slashes through your target in a wide arc, dealing a % physical damage to your target and a % physical damage to all the enemies in front of you. So it allows you basically to have a higher end single target damage, and on top of that, it also gives some AoE cleave. Now after Ravage, it also applies Dreadful Wounds, which inflicts a bleed that causes % damage over 6 seconds and saps its victim's strength, reducing its damage they deal to you by 10%. It also increases your Maul and Raise damage by 20% with Bestial Strength, and with Killing Strikes, your passive, Ravage increases your agility by 8% and armor granted by Iron Fur by 20% for 8 seconds. So you can see where the damage and defensive mitigation are becoming hand in hand with this hero talent. There's an also powered Shapeshift, which allows you to cast Frenzy Regeneration in cat form. Your bear form reduces magic damage by 4%, and Shred and Swipe damage increased by 12%, and Mangle is increased by 25%. Now all of these hero talents lead us to our capstone, Claw Rampage. So during Berserk, Mangle, Swipe, and Thrash have a 25% chance to make your next maul become Ravage. But overall, that's the idea, is basically you're trading out some survivability in your bear form to swap to cat form to do increased damage through Ravage, your bleeds, extra maul damage, all kinds of different things. So that's basically the play style of Druid of the Claw. And it definitely takes some getting used to of swapping from bear form to cat form, so beginners, I would highly recommend Elun's Chosen. Now both of these talent trees will have a pretty big difference in your actual talent nodes that we will talk about after this section, but for now just know Druid of the Claw is more of a physical based, and Elun's Chosen is more of a magic based. So you will take more magic nodes with Elun's Chosen, and you will take more physical damage nodes when it comes to Druid of the Claw. Let's go ahead and have an overview look of Elun's Chosen. Elun's Chosen basically allows you to align yourself with more of the arcane magic style of the Druid class. So the first node that we want to look at is Boundless Moonlight, which gives your Lunar Beam, which is a cooldown that we'll talk about later, now causes you to leech life equal to 10% of all the damage dealt to enemies within the beam. It also allows their Fury of Elun to end with a flash of energy blasting nearby enemies for % astral damage. It also increases your Moonfire's damage by 8%, which is a dot that we'll talk about here soon. With Glistening Fur, it reduces the arcane damage taken by 6% and all other magic damage taken by 3%. We have Moon Guardian, which free automatic Moonfires from Galactic Guardian, generates 5 rage. We will talk about Galactic Guardian and the proc that we get here soon. Don't worry, a lot of this will make sense after we get through the talents. But after that, we have Lunar Amplification, which each non-arcane damage ability you use increases the damage of your next arcane damaging ability by 3%, stacking up to 3 times. And then you have Atmospheric Exposure, which enemies damaged by your Lunar Beam or Fury of a Loon take 6% increased damage from you for 6 seconds. After that, we have a Lunar Calling, which Thrash now deals arcane damage, and its damage is increased by 12%, so it is technically an arcane ability. We also have the Light of a Loon, which Moonfire damage has a chance to call down a Fury of a Loon to follow your target for 3 seconds. On top of that, we have Lunation, which your arcane abilities reduce the cooldown of Lunar Beam by 3 seconds. Lunar Beam will be a very big damage dealer and a very big defensive as well as a Guardian Druid. So making sure you're spamming your Thrash ability and your Moonfire ability will decrease your Lunar Beam cooldown by 3 seconds, which we will talk about our rotation later, and making sure that these abilities are staying off cooldown. And for our capstone talent, we have the Eternal Moon. Further increases the power of Boundless Moonlight. Your Lunar Beam increases mastery by an additional 10%, deals 30% increased damage, and lasts 3 seconds longer. And the Fury of a Loon Flash of Energy now generates 6 rage, and its damage is increased by 50%. Now, the reason I recommend the Loon's Chosen so much is because you really don't have to switch out of Druid of the Claw form. This just kind of adds a little bit more rotation, and you need to be more familiar with the class to be able to output the correct amount of damage and not also take too much damage in the process. Switching to cat form, you need to make sure you're switching in the correct points, but with a Loon's Chosen, you really don't have to worry about that. It's much easier to play. Your rotation really doesn't change. It's a much simpler rotation on top of that. You have a lot of healing, you have a lot of defensives. So beginners, I would highly recommend looking into a Loon's Chosen, but if you're a more advanced player, Druid of the Claw is very fun. It does do a lot of damage. It's amazing in raid, but you will see a lot of high-end tanks use a Loon's Chosen in higher-end keys just because you don't have to worry about getting one shot and your survivability is not threatened as much. So if you are a beginner, I would stick with a Loon's Chosen. Now that we've talked about our hero talents, let's go ahead and discuss our talent trees. Now, these talent trees have been reworked recently, so it makes it a lot easier to be able to get your corruption and a couple other things. Now, you may be wondering, well, if we are going Loon's Chosen, why are we taking Rake? Is because there's a Grievous Wounds passive right below it, which increases your Thrash damage by 10%. For Loon's Chosen, we will take as many damage doses as we can because this is a much tankier build. Now, there are a lot of things that you can change around with this build. You can take Innovate off and you can take Hibernate, which Hibernate basically allows you to put a target to sleep, forces the enemy target to sleep for up to 40 seconds. Any damage will awaken the target. Only one target may be forced to hibernate at a time. Only works on beasts and dragonkin. So you can use these on very specific skips, or you can use it as a stop, multiple different things. So it is kind of a talent node that you can live without. You can swap this for Innovate, which Innovate fuses a friendly healer with the energy, allowing them to cast spells without spending mana for 8 seconds. So especially for Restoration Shamans right now, Restoration Shamans are constantly using mana. This is a very good ability for them. Or if you're doing a large pool and your healer is just running out of mana, keeping everyone alive, you can pop Innovate. They can use all of their abilities, mana free basically. So this is a very good ability. You can swap out Wild Charge, which grants a movement ability that varies by shift form for bearer charges to an enemy, immobilizing them for 4 seconds. Another ability that I want to talk about is Soothe. Soothe allows you to soothe the target, dispelling all enrage effects. So if there's some elite in a pack or something that is stacking rage, or they have increased damage or attack speed or armor, you can soothe that enemy and they lose those effects. So this is a very good ability to keep and use on your Druid. You can swap Wild Charge for Tiger Dash if you don't need the immobilizing effect, or if you don't need the stop, you can change it for a 200% increased move speed in cat form. So if you need to move quickly in raid, or if you need to move quickly in a dungeon, you can swap it for Tiger Dash. Another talent that you can swap off if you need it is you can take Matted Fur, which is when you use Bark Skin or Survival Instincts, you have an Absorb Shield for a % amount of damage for 8 seconds. You can take that off and you can put it in Symbiotic Relationship, which forms a bond with an ally. Your self-healing also heals your bonding ally for 10% of the amount healed, and your healing to your bonded ally also allows you to heal for 8% of the amount healed. So it is a good leeching / healing ability that you can use for not just yourself but other players if you don't need the Matted Fur. There is also a talent node here where you can choose either between magical damage increased or physical damage increased. Obviously we're going Loon's Chosen, so you want to take Circle of the Heavens because it increases your magical damage by 5%. If you're in Druid of the Claw, you would probably switch over to Circle of the Wild, which would give you a physical damage increase. But basically, if you're starting off with the Druid side, this is what I would be taking in general. Let's go ahead and move over to the Guardian Druid side for Elune's Chosen. Now, because we have taken Elune's Chosen, we are required to talent into Lunar Beam, which is in the bottom right hand of your corner. Which Lunar Beam summons a beam of lunar light at your location, increasing your mastery by 30%, dealing % arcane damage, and healing you for % health over 11 seconds. So it is not only a good defensive ability, but it also increases your damage and leech by quite a bit. And one node that I really do want to discuss is Ursul's Warding, which is a newer node that allows you to have a magical damage reduction equal to 10% of your damage reduction from armor. It is a decent magical damage reduction. I still feel like this needs to be buffed, especially for Bear. If you've done any raiding this season, especially for the big magic hit from Sprocket in Raid, it's Pyro Party Pack. It does a very big magic damage hit and it can take a lot of your health. So this is very nice, but you will still take a lot of damage. And Bear kind of does lack a little bit in the magic damage reduction, just like Demon Hunter does. Now for talent nodes that you can swap out, this is what I would normally take. If you are a beginner and you are learning the class, you need as many defensive nodes as you can. I would take Reinvigoration, which Frenzied Regeneration heals over 2 additional seconds and casts Rejuvenation and Regrowth on you at 200% effectiveness. And then I would also take Earth Warden. When you deal direct damage with Thrash, you gain a charge of Earth Warden, reducing the damage of the next auto attack you take by 25%. And Earth Warden may also have up to 3 charges. Now, if you do take both of these nodes, I would not take Raise, which Raise just is another ability that changes your Maul ability, which we will talk about here soon in our core rotation. But if you do take these, you also want to be taking Elune's Favored, which is while in bear form, you deal 10% increased arcane damage and are healed for 25% of all arcane damage done. Now, the other way of doing this tree, if you want a little bit more damage and you're not worried about survivabilities, you can take these 3 nodes off and you can put it into Vulnerable Flesh, which makes your Maul and Raise have an additional 30% chance to crit strike, and you will put it into Tooth and Claw and Raise. Now, Tooth and Claw is a proc that we will talk about here soon for your Raise ability, which auto attacks have a 20% chance to empower your next cast of Maul or Raise, stacking up to 2 times. Your empowered cast of Maul or Raise deals 40% increased damage, costs 100% less rage, and reduces the target's damage to you by 12%. Now, because of Tooth and Claw, you always want to take Raise, vice versa. I feel like these both go hand in hand. So with Raise, strike the might of Urza, dealing % physical damage to your target and a % physical damage to all other enemies in front of you, damaging reduced beyond 5 targets. So basically, Raise replaces your Maul ability and increases the damage and increases the AoE cleave. Now, using Raise, it does change your core rotation as Elune's Chosen. If you don't take any of these nodes and you go the defensive tree, you will have a lot less to do. You won't have to use Raise. You can use Maul as more of a single target damage dealer or a little bit of cleave if you're trying to prioritize a target, but it does make your entire rotation easier if you don't take Raise. But if you're not worried about survivability and you want the extra damage, you can just take these off and put it into Tooth and Claw and Raise. You can also, if you're doing this Rage and Tooth and Claw ability, you can take it out of Fury of Nature and put it into Vicious Cycle, which your main goal increases the damage of your next Maul or Raise, and casting Maul or Raise increases the damage of your next Mangle by 15%, stacking up to 3 times. So if you're going more of a Raise build, this is what I would do in general. But if you're going more of a defensive arcane damaging / easier rotation, you're just worrying about surviving, you're not really worrying about damage for beginners, I would highly recommend just doing this. Now let's go ahead and discuss the Druid of the Claw build that I would recommend. Now we will be talenting into Rip because we will be using it. We'll also be talenting into Primal Fury, which is while in cat form, your critical strike with an attack that generates a combo point, you gain an additional combo point. Damage over time cannot trigger this effect, and your Mangle crit strike damage is increased by 20%. We are going to be dropping a little bit of RCC, but we will be picking up Fluid Form, which Shred, Rake, and Skullbash can be used in any form, and shifting into cat form, and shift you into cat form. If necessary, Mangle can be used in any form and shifts you into bear form. Now, the nodes that you can kind of swap up is you can take Vortex or Typhoon. You can kind of swap these up, but the slow is very nice. It kind of depends. Typhoon without the slow is a little awkward. It'll knock everyone away from you. It will reduce their move speed and it will be an interrupt, but it can be kind of awkward if you don't combo these two together, where you lay down Vortex and then you knock them away and it pulls them back in. We will talk about these cooldowns later in this video. And important nodes that I want to talk about is we will be taking the physical damage increase, like I said earlier. We will also be taking Lycara's meditation. You retain Lycara's teaching bonus from your most recent shapeshift form for 5 seconds after shapeshifting out of it, provided you remain in that form for 2.9 seconds, reduced by haste. Which Lycara's teaching, you gain 6% of the stat while on each form. So if you're in no form, you have haste. If you're in cat form, you have crit strike, and you have bear form, you have versatility. So if you're switching from bear to cat, you keep the versatility. If you're switching from cat to bear, you keep the crit strike. Now there is a couple things that you can drop out of this tree. If you don't need the movement speed, you can put it into Skull Bash, which is an interrupt, so you could do it that way. You could also take it out of this and put it into Typhoon if you need more CC, or you can take Innovate off and put it into Hibernation. I mean, there's a lot of different variations you could do. But in general, this is how I would play it, just as a generalized thing. It's very easy to understand, gives you a lot of damage, it gives you a lot of defensives. This is what I would play. Now for the Guardian Druid side, of course, it kind of is pretty simple because we've already talked about it already, but we would 100% drop Reinvigoration and Earth Warden, and we would drop in Loon's Favored and one of the Fury of Nature, and we would put it into Vulnerable Flesh. We would put it into Tooth and Claw. We would put it into Raise, and we would put it into Vicious Cycle. We would also be dropping Twin Moonfire, Lunar Beam, and we will be putting them into Flashing Claws, which Thrash has a 20% chance to trigger an additional Thrash. Thrash stacks 2 additional times. So basically, very simple tree. I mean, there are still things that you can swap out. If you're really struggling to stay alive in Druid of the Claw, you can swap out Fury Nature and put it into Reinvigoration. Give you a little bit of more healing, a little bit of more sustain and survivability. But all in all, this is how I would play this tree in general. Let's go ahead and move on to your core rotation. If you are spec'd into Illune's Chosen, this is how you would start. This is what your rotation would look like for single target and for multi-target. Now for your base rotation, this might sound very obvious, but you want to make sure that you are in bear form. Next, you will want to be maintaining your dots, which your main dot is Moonfire. A Moonfire is a quick beam of lunar light that burns the enemy for % arcane damage and an additional % arcane damage over 18 seconds. After that, you want to make sure that you are using your Thrash cooldown off CD. Thrash applies bleeds, it strikes all enemies, dealing % bleed damage and an additional bleed damage over 15 seconds. When applied for bear form, this effect can stack up to 3 times, or 5 if you are talented into Flashing Claws. After that, you will be wanting to use your Mangle ability. You want to make sure this is off cooldown alongside Thrash. Your Mangle hits a target for % physical damage and it generates 12 rage. So basically looking at it as your Thrash and your Mango abilities are your rage generators as a Guardian Druid. After that, you will be wanting to spend all of your rage on Iron Fur, which is your main physical mitigation ability. You want to have anywhere between 1 and 5 stacks for a basic pool. If it's a much larger pool, you want to have even more stacks than that. Now, if you have enough stacks, you can use some of your rage on Maul or Raise if you're talented into it. Next, you will be wanting to use Frenzied Regeneration, which heals you for 24% over 3 seconds. After that, there are 2 procs that I want you to manage. One is called Tooth and Claw, and the other one is called Galactic Guardian.
Boom. What up, Silver? I can only hear back doing
Tooth and Claw auto attacks have a 20% chance to empower your next cast of Maul or Raise, stacking up to 2 times. An Empower cast of Maul or Raise deals 40% increased damage, costs 100% less rage, and reduces the target damage to you by 12% for 6 seconds. The other proc that I want you to manage is Galactic Guardian. Your damage has a 5% chance to trigger a free automatic Moonfire on that target. When this occurs, the next Moonfire you cast generates 8 rage and deals 300% increased damage. Now, once you get these procs, obviously make sure Mangle and Thrash are off cooldown, then use these procs. Now, where you do have time where all your abilities are on cooldown and you kind of just don't have any abilities to use, which sometimes happens as a bear, you can use your Swipe ability, which swipes nearby enemies, inflicting physical damage, and its damage varies in shapeshift form. Now, this does build rage, so you can use this as a filler ability if you need more rage, but instead of Swipe, you can just use Moonfire. Now, I will also say, if it is a new target coming at you that you already don't have a Moonfire on, I would prioritize Moonfire over Swipe, just so you can get that debuff on them and you can have that rage generation. because depending on what you're talented into, that enemy will deal less damage to you, and you want to make sure that they're debuffed at all times. So Moonfire is generally more prioritized than Swipe, but Swipe can also be used if you need more range or if you just need a filler ability, and all the Moonfire dots have already been placed on all the enemies. Now that we've discussed our core rotation and talents, let's go ahead and talk about our cooldowns. For our first major cooldown, we will be talking about Incarnation, which is an improved bear form that grants the benefits of Berserk, causing Mangle to hit up to 3 targets and increases your maximum health by 30%. On top of that, if you aren't talented into specific talent nodes, which we are for these builds, it will also give you bonus haste, it will reduce the cooldown of your Thrash and Mangle, it will give you free Frenzied Regeneration that you can use, and it will also drastically decrease the rage cost of all of your rage costing abilities, aka your Iron Fur and Raise and Maul. And because we take Urzok's Guidance, every 25 rage you spend reduces the cooldown of Incarnation by 1 second. So it actually helps having your uptime of Incarn available. In terms of other basic damage mitigations, of course, we have Iron Fur, which we talked about earlier, which you definitely want to make sure that this is your main defensive and you are using this whenever you have the rage available. Now, a tip I can give you as well is when you're nearing the end of a pack that is about to be finished, you can pull your rage and hold on to your rage. So then when you move on to the next pack, you can pop an Iron Fur or 2 again so that you have that instant damage mitigation and you won't take a lot of damage at the beginning of the pool. After that, we'll talk about Frenzied Regen, which heals you for 24% of your health over 3 seconds. This will be your main self-healing ability, and you will want to be using this relatively often, depending on how big the pool size is. Next, we have a Lunar Beam, which summons a beam of lunar light at your location, increasing your mastery by 1% and arcane damage by 1% and heals you for 8% over 8 seconds. This will be one of your main defensive and offensive cooldowns and should be used off CD. After that, we have Rage of the Sleeper, which unleashes the Rage of Urzok for 8 seconds, preventing 20% of all damage you take, and increases your damage by 15%, granting you 20% leech and reflect nature damage back at your attackers. After that, we have a Bark Skin, which is when your skin becomes as tough as bark, reducing all damage you take by 20% and prevents damage from delaying your spell casts, and it lasts 8 seconds. This is also usable while stunned, frozen, incapacitated, feared, or asleep, and in all shapeshift forms. So that means cat and bear form. And because this is such a low cooldown, you can use this basically on almost every pool, if not every other pool. I would highly recommend using this alongside Lunar Beam if it's a very big pool, or just using one or the other, depending on if your Rage of the Sleeper or Lunar Beam is down. Bark Skin can also be a very good defensive at the beginning of a pool. Say you don't have any Iron Fur stacks, you didn't have enough Rage to create an Iron Fur stack before you started a pool, you can just pop Bark Skin, get some Rage, and start creating Iron Fur stacks. After that, you have Survival Instincts, which is a very long cooldown, but it does reduce all damage you take by 50% for 6 seconds. So if you're doing a very large pool, or if there's a big tank buster coming in, this is going to be one of your kind of, I'm about to die, I need to use Survival Instincts to survive this hit or to survive this pool. There's also a talent node that you can talent into called Improved Survival Instincts, which allows you to have 2 charges of Survival Instincts. So basically, it will allow you to use it more often. Now, after all these defensive / offensive abilities, you have something called Heart of the Wild, which we are talented into for Lynch Chosen. Heart of the Wild increases your physical damage and arcane damage, which are Moonfire and your Thrash and Mangle, and increases these damaging abilities. This is a 100% offensive cooldown, so you can use this on a boss, you can use this on a big pool. Now it does have an incredibly large cooldown of 5 minutes. Now that we've kind of discussed all of our basic cooldowns and our defensive and offensive cooldowns, we're going to talk about our utility cooldowns, which one of our main utility cooldowns is Mark of the Wild, which infuses a friendly target with the power of the wild, increasing their versatility by 3% for 60 minutes. If a target is in your party or raid, all party and raid members will be affected. Now remember, this not only increases your healing and damage, but it also, for every 2% versatility, you get 1% damage reduction. So now with that damage reduction and bonus damage and healing amplification, you can see how important and how strong Mark of the Wild is. Next, we have Typhoon, which Typhoon blasts targets within 15 yards in front of you with a violent typhoon, knocking them back and reducing their movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. Now this can be used as an interrupt, but also this can go hand in hand with your Vortex ability, which Ursul's Vortex conjures a vortex of wind for 10 seconds at the destination, reducing the movement speed of all enemies within 8 yards by 50%. The first time an enemy attempts to leave the vortex, winds will pull that enemy back to its center and is usable in all shapeshifts. So there is kind of a little trick with Bear Druid. You can drop Vortex on the ground and then Typhoon everyone in front of you, which will knock them back out of the Vortex and they will get pulled back in. You always want to kind of use your Vortex first and then Typhoon, because you can use that as like a mass interrupt or mass CC. Next, we have Incapacitating Roar, which shifts into bear form and invoke the spirit of Ursul to let loose a deafening roar, incapacitating all enemies within 10 yards for 3 seconds. Now this is basically going to be your main AoE, CC, or interrupt that you'll be using. After that, we have Soothe, which we talked a little bit about earlier, which soothes a target, dispelling all enrage effects, which can greatly reduce the damage that you take as a tank if there is an enraged mob in front of you. Next, we have Stampeding Roar, which shifts into bear form and let loose a wild roar, increasing the movement speed of all friendly players by 60% for 8 seconds. So you can use this if there is a mechanic for a boss going out, or if people need to move out of a stun, you can pop it and give them a speed boost. Next, we have Remove Corruption, which nullifies corruption effects on a friendly target, removing all curses, and is a poison dispel. Next, we have Rebirth. With Rebirth, returns the spirit of a body, restoring a dead target life with 100% health and at least 20% mana, which is basically a battle res. Next, let's go ahead and talk about stat priority. Obviously, item level over everything else, but you can equally match versatility and haste. Personally, I would have haste over versatility, just for more damage output, more rage regeneration, which allows me to have more iron fur, but versatility is just such a good stat because of the healing and damage output that you get as a bear and damage reduction for versatility. Thirdly, we have mastery, which is just generally not as good as haste or verse, so I would prioritize haste or verse. And then fourth, we have crit strike. But that's all really I have for you guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you sub to the channel, follow me on TikTok and Instagram, and I also stream on Twitch and YouTube. If that is something you're interested in, stop in, say hi. You can see me play these tanks on a very regular basis. But thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.